This time I have a Sony Betamax. This one is an SL-HF 500. This is a beta hi-fi machine. It was one of the machines that uses 711B2 chassis. Quite reliable. There's a few issues that these ones have, and this one suffered one that is starting to pop up more often now. It won't load a tape. So let's check it out and see what the problem is and see if we can get this one to work. Today I have my favorite video format, and that's the Sony Betamax. Yes, I was a beta fan, and that's what I used to use. Was for all my home recording, like time shift recording, I didn't use a VHS machine. I used a Betamax because I was more concerned about the picture quality than going to the rental store and renting movies, because that's something I just didn't do. And when I did, I had a Laserdisc player for that. So I had several Sony Betamax machines, SL-HF 900, 5200, a couple of SL-HF 1000s. I had my share of Betamax machines, and I still do. I still have my two SL-HF 1000s. I still have my SL-HF 900. I think I've got an SL-HF 400 kicking around here somewhere too. SL 2000, I had two of them. I got rid of one. Still got another one. Don't know what I'm going to do with it, but it's sitting here somewhere. Anyway, I had my share of beta machines. I like beta, and of course I had the Betacam professional format as well. I still have that for digitizing. But today we have a Betamax. This one is a what is this one? I think it's an SL-HF 300. The front panel's missing. What is this thing? Let's take a look and see. Is this a 300? This is an SL-HF 500. Okay, well that just means it's the 300 with an extra head. SL-HF 500 was a 3-head machine, so it would give you good slow motion and special effects. Before I even turn it on, I'm going to pop the top off it and give it a good visual inspection. This is one that's in for service, and it came in along with that SL 757. Same person owns this one, and said it didn't work. We'll open it up and we'll see what it looks like inside, and then plug it in. My LCD monitor is still broken, so I'm working with the plasma as my framing monitor. This was probably the most popular chassis that Sony ever used on all of their machines. 710 was a good chassis. That one used a 3-piece drum, which made it difficult to change the upper drum without the micrometer, because eccentricity was a big problem on those machines. They solved that problem on this one by going to a 2-piece drum that does not rotate with just a slot, and the heads protrude through the slot. And then this became the standard mechanism. It started out with the 711 chassis, which was used on the SL 2000, SL 2500, and SL 2700. All three of which I have, incidentally. I have a 2500 that is broken, and maybe I'll fix it someday so I can sell it. And I have a 2700 as well. And those machines had the direct drive tape spindles. And the problem with that, and the same problem with the Panasonic machines, such as this 1730 that used it, which I have somebody right now that's insisting how great that mechanism was, but actually was crap, and Sony figured it out. And Sony responded by making what was probably one of the most reliable chassis. This one's got what, 4 motors. You got a loading motor. It does double duty to thread the tape and to operate the cassette elevator with this toothed gear and a planetary gear set. Drum motor, capstan motor, and a rail motor, which is directly driven to a pendulum gear. And this has to be probably the most reliable of all the mechanisms for controlling the tape spindles. Sony learned their lesson early. They had 3 models that used direct drive. SL 2000, which was the portable, SL2500 and then the SL2700. And the problem with the direct drive and the VHS manufacturers found out the same thing. But the biggest problem with the direct drive motors was that extra weight for that magnet that was on the spindle itself caused a fair bit of inertia. So when you were spooling your tape, fast forward or rewind, what would happen is, as the tape was spooling under tension, you'd start to get a bit of a slap, because as the tape is spooling, nothing stays the same. There's always slight tension errors, which will cause, and just the tape itself will cause the tape to maybe stick a little bit somewhere here or there and cause the speed to drop, and the motor that's driving it will try to adjust by speeding up slightly, and of course that will cause the other spool to spill extra tape, cause slack. There was a feedback circuit that used basically the tape back tension arm was linked to an optical or a magnetic sensor, which controlled, like through by magnetic I mean like a Hall effect sensor, that controlled the back tension of the spool that was free spooling. The problem that would happen is the tape tension changed, the feedback would change, and it would change the back tension, and that could result in either lower torque or higher torque. If it went into higher torque, it would start to slow down the freewheeling spool, be it the supply side if you're in fast forward or the take up side if you're in rewind. It would start to take up the slack, but then what would happen is the tape would become tight and the tape would stretch slightly. You get the slingshot effect. What ended up happening was you ended up with tape that was, you'd hear it going tick, 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 slapping. Even on the VHS machine, which unspooled the tape, you'd still hear. In that case, there was nothing really to control the feedback, because the tape wasn't pulled out of the cassette and making contact with a tension arm like it was on the Beta machine. But you'd end up with the tape that was slapping, and what happened is, especially if you had the thinner tapes, was they'd actually break the tape. And that was the biggest drawback with all those machines that used direct drive motors. It didn't matter whether it was a Betamax machine, a VHS machine, or even digital audio tape. Sony used direct drive motors on a few of their DAT machines. Those DAT machines, incidentally, command a very high price, because people think that, oh, it's got an extra motor, it's better. And actually it isn't. It's not as reliable, and it's more likely to break your tape. And the same thing occurred on every format of tape, except for maybe a reel-to-reel. But even cassette machines that used direct drive motors, they had issues with them. Even reel-to-reels had issues when the tape would stick on things, when you had sticky tape syndrome, for example. But on the VCRs, it was a real problem. Anyway, enough about that. We'll see if this thing even powers up. So give it power, and I've got it on my CRT monitor so that I don't have to plug it into this one. And I can see that machine is powering up. So that's a good sign. That means that it's not dead. And I see snow on the screen, so the good old tuner is still tuning. So let's grab a couple tapes and just see what happens. See if this might even be working, but we'll see. So first things first. It doesn't load. Well, there's our problem. It doesn't want to load. I wonder what's causing that. Maybe a bad switch? Well, we'll find that out. I think this tape is one that I can actually record on. This is one I punched a hole down on the bottom to put it into my Betacam machine to see what would happen if I tried to record Betacam SP onto an oxide tape. Because the Betacam machines would record standard Betacam on an oxide tape, and the metal tape would record Betacam SP. Unfortunately, the Betacam SP machine that I've got, it will play back oxide tapes, but it will only record in SP mode, which requires a detection hole, which is what I cut down on the bottom here. I forced my machine to record in SP mode to see what would happen, and let's just say the picture coming back was not very happy, because the oxide tape could not handle the bandwidth that Betacam SP was trying to push down onto the tape. So I got nothing. So I covered those holes back up, and we'll use it as a beta test tape again. This thing's not loading. So we got to figure out why. Now we can try to force this thing by pressing down on here, and it's like it's trying. I think this is jammed. Let's just unplug the power. Like this should turn. We'll plug it in now and see whether the motor spins. I think the front loading mechanism might be jammed on this. Hopefully it's not broken, but okay, so if I press this here, we should see this spin. And it does. So we have a jammed front loading mechanism, or elevator, as the pros would call it. So let's remove the elevator. It's held in with 4 screws. Hopefully I'm not going to find any broken gears. Just enough to clear this. Pop the switch out. There's just 2 little clips that hold it in place, and I can just take the switch out like that, and we'll turn this unit on its side, get it out of the way, so I can work on the front loader and see why it's jammed. Just remove these 3 screws that hold the gear assembly together. Now it might be that it's just got jammed because the switch was dirty and it didn't signal when the cassette was up all the way, and the motor continued to wind it back, which is always a possibility. Or it could be broken gears. Hope it's not broken gears, because that would be unfortunate. Trying to find a gear for one of these would be next to impossible. But I don't see any broken gears. I do see a mechanism that's been wound back big time. Okay, I'm just going to try running this through the motions by hand. So if I press down on this latch lever here, the loading mechanism goes in, it drops. And I don't see any cracked gears. That's very good. They've got lots of grease on them too, so it's not like the mechanism is dry. There's plenty of grease on here, so I don't need to do anything there. I think what happened was I'm going to throw this back on, because my inspection shows that there's no fault there. I think probably what happened on this one is that switch that goes in here that I just took out. The switch contacts are bad, and either that or they didn't open when the cassette was released, and it kept the motor running longer and wound this down and jammed it. That's what I think probably happened on this one, and it's not broken parts. I'm just going to put it together so that I can go it through, or run it through the process by hand and make sure that nothing is jamming or going to break. But I just wanted to make sure that everything was good. Okay, the mechanism's down all the way now. We turn it the other way and the mechanism will go up. And go through the lid list here. Okay, so I think the mechanism's okay. I think the problem is this switch on the side here. When the tape gets inserted, there's a little cam here that will close those contacts, and that's what signals that the mechanism should draw the tape in. Once it's down, there's another switch that gets activated on the bottom to show that the tape is down. But when the tape's ejecting, it turns on the motor, and the motor stays on until this gets to the top. And when that switch opens, that's when the motor is supposed to stop. I think our fault on this one is this switch, and possibly these two switches here. One of these is the record lockout switch, and the other one is the cassette down. And if they were to also get dirty, they could cause some issues. So I'm going to just give a shot of cleaner down into these switches. They're the same type of switches as this one here. It's just a leaf switch. So I'm just going to give a shot of cleaner down here into the switches themselves. That's only because I don't feel like taking it all apart. And we'll give this switch here a shot of cleaner as well. And just operate the switches. This will typically clean them. I'll throw the mechanism back in and we'll test it and see if it works. First I'll reattach the switch. You can see the switch in here if you can see it, how it operates. That cam, or lobe on that gear, will press the switch when the tape goes in. If I press down here, you'll see that that'll activate that switch. You see, that's what operates it. We'll drop the basket back in. Elevator, front loading mechanism, whatever you want to call it. I think elevator is probably a term that was used more on the old top loaders, but it was used on broadcast machines for both the front loader and the top loading machines. The consumer machines typically called it a front loading mechanism. Moment of truth. Will it load? Aha! Yeah, it was that switch, I think, because it kicked it out there for a second. Oh, this is slipping too. The gear is slipping down here. The gears come off. Okay, we gotta fix that. It's going to sit there and spin forever. The gear on the bottom of this is come off. It's going to try to unload. Okay, so that gear is slipping. We got to pull that piece out now. There's a black gear on the bottom here that's got a crack in it, and it's slipping. So off comes the loading belt, and we'll pop the planetary gear set out. Of course, there's a cable here that's in place that's jamming it, so we'll just get that out of the way. Now I can lift it up. Okay, this black gear here is going to be broken. I can probably turn that by hand. Am I right? Yeah, it's broken. You see, I can turn that by hand. I was going to remove it and we'll fix it. So I'm just going to spread the little plastic clips here that hold it in place onto the top of the planetary set. This is the planetary gear over here. So what that does is it basically transfers power from the motor, so depending on the position of the solenoid, which operates the power transfer, it either locks this spool so that the motor power is transferred over. Well, that's popped up.
Put that back down. It either stops this one from turning so the motor power is transferred over to this spool to drive the front loader, or it locks that one and then the motor power gets transferred to the bottom one, which is, as you can see, if I stop it, well, I can turn it and it just slips. See? Not turning because it's broken right there. This is broken. There's a crack on this black gear. You can see the crack right there, so that's allowing the shaft to turn. You can see it right through there as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the shaft off of the gear, and we're going to load this up with some epoxy. It will come off. It will. I don't want the gear to break in too, but we're gonna have to put some epoxy in here just so that I can glue this on. This is quite a common, there we go. This is quite a common problem on these units here. So I'll put some epoxy, I'll mix up some epoxy, we'll put it into the gear and onto this shaft here and let it set up, and then that will fix this one. So I'm using cold weld, which is similar to JB Weld. I think JB Weld is probably better. But this is half the price. So how's it saying? You get what you pay for? Put a little bit of the steel infused epoxy on here and a little bit of hardener. Get it mixed up. Scoop some up onto the part that we need to glue. That should be plenty, and use that to push the epoxy into the gear. Scrape off the excess. Yeah, I know I made way too much, but that's what happens when you're mixing epoxy. You got to try to mix equal amounts, so you generally end up with more than you actually need. Get that on there, and get some on the bottom here. Make sure that it's going to stick well. Maybe even some into the crack if I can. Try to stop the gear from opening up anymore. Okay, I'm now going to let this sit and harden for a while. It's supposed to be 5-minute epoxy, but it's a little bit cool here in the shop today. It's only about 11 degrees Celsius in here. I got the heat on. Dipping down almost to freezing last night, so we've been in a blanket of fog for the last couple days, which has made driving interesting to say the least when you can only see basically the lines in front of you. It's always amusing, you know, when you're driving in the fog, and you're, you know, in a say a 100-kilometer zone, and well, everybody's doing 60 because you can't see 10 feet in front of you. Never mind any safe distance. and you get some jackass that goes around you in his big BMW or his big SUV thinking he's invincible, only to see him in the ditch up the road a little further. I saw that last night. Guy ended up in the ditch after he passed everybody. I think everybody went by and just tooted their horn as they went by, as he was stuck in the median because he missed a corner and went off the road. Okay, I'm going to let this dry for a bit and then we'll reassemble it and see if it works. Alright, got the gear repaired. We'll put the gear back in through the bottom. We'll lock it in. And now it won't slip. And throw the loading motor assembly back in where it belongs. We have to make sure that we get the control in behind the plunger, otherwise it won't switch modes properly. So we just pull that forward like that, drop it in place, and put the screws back in. Good old toothed belt that will never, ever, ever fail unless someone cuts it. Okay, now I should be able to plug the unit in and it should work. Well, at least it should load the tape. I don't know if it's going to work or not. There might be other problems with it, but this should solve the tape loading issue. A little bit slow, but it got the job done. Let's see if there's a picture of the monitor. Well, there won't be any at this point. I will have to fast forward past this portion of the tape where I tried to record a Betacam SP signal. So there won't be anything here yet. It's operating. The tape is moving. So let's try another tape that I know that there is something on. This is when it goes through all the modes. This tape is my scenery tape, recorded in Beta 2. There it is. It's playing perfect. I tell you, that drum bearing is it the drum bearing? I'm just doing that. It sounds like the drum bearing's a bit noisy, probably because it hasn't been run for so many years. I'll let this thing run for a bit here and just see how it performs. Some of you guys might want to see what happens if I put a Beta 1 tape into this machine that was recorded in Beta 1S, or Super Beta 1. And I can assure you it won't play. It better not play anyway. Here is a Beta 1 tape. It should play it just won't play properly. It plays, but tracking is obviously critical because of the guard bands between each track. But what you'll see there is, well, the color's not right. Right? The white is overemphasized. It's too white. The blacks are crushed, and it just doesn't look good. The color looks pretty bad, and that's because the bandwidth on Super Beta is much greater than regular beta. This machine isn't even a Super Beta machine, and this was recorded in SHB Super High Band Beta 1 from the SL HF1000. So yes, it doesn't play, and it wasn't expected to play. Completely incompatible. Even playing a Beta 2 S Beta or Super Beta, because this is not a Super, this is a regular Betamax. This machine does not have Super Beta playback capability. It's a standard beta machine, and even at that, oh, my tracking's a little off there. It's got to adjust the tracking control. But even at that, there is a little bit of overmodulation that we can't get away from because it was recorded in Super Beta. This time I'll play a non-Super Beta tape. This was recorded on an SL2000. It's a regular Betamax machine, no Beta Hi-Fi, no Super Beta. This is actually the Super Beta training seminar. Nice burn-in on that CRT. I was quite proud of that I managed to actually physically burn a CRT when I was using it for a security monitor. But that's looking good, and no problem there. It's playing back perfectly. As I say, the Super Beta, how it worked was well, as he's explaining it right there, what they did is they extended the carrier frequency up by 400 kilohertz so that they could recover the spectrum that was lost for putting in the carriers for Beta Hi-Fi. So, because the Beta Hi-Fi machines, such as this one here, actually reduced the picture quality a little bit. It made it more look like VHS because they used some spectrum of the lower sideband to put the carriers in. So what the Super Beta did was it restored that spectrum by shifting the frequency of the luminance carrier higher to restore that frequency. The problem was non-Super Beta machines showed this as excessive bandwidth, excessive frequency. It was beyond the high frequency limit for the Betamax standard, and it resulted in a little bit of instability in the picture. That's why the Super Beta machines always had a switch. You could shut it off, so if you wanted to play the tape back on a regular non-Super Beta machine, you could turn it off and it would improve the compatibility with the conventional Betamax, which is what this tape is, and that's why it plays perfect, because this is not a Beta or Super Beta tape. It's not even a Beta Hi-Fi tape for that matter. Interesting thing about Super Beta was if you turned the Hi-Fi off and the Super Beta on, you could improve the picture even more. And the Beta 1 super high band machines, if you turned on your super high band Beta 1 speed and turned off the Hi-Fi, it would record an even better picture. The Beta 1 SHB with Beta 1 speed and super high band, the picture quality was rivaling that of 3/4 inch, which was pretty darn good. Anyway, this one's fixed, so there you go. But all I had to do was fix that gear for the loading mechanism, the threading mechanism. So this is the Sony Super Beta training seminar I've got playing. If this type of stuff interests you, this video is on my channel. I would advise just to go and search it out, and you can see this entire training seminar. This was when Super Beta was first brought out, and they brought all the techs in. I was in a room with, I think there was 24 of us, 24 or 25 of us in that room that day, and I was filming this to take it back to the shop for the two other guys that I was working with that didn't get a chance to go. Usually they'd send all of us down, right, for the training, but because the classroom was so full, they could only let one person from each shop go. So I filmed it for the guys at the shop, and then we made copies of this and gave it to the other shops that were there so they could give the same course to their beta techs. Again, this being back in the mid-80s, in Canada, Beta still had around a 45 to 50% market share at this time. This is before the big decline in Beta. Beta still had a pretty good market share, and there was a lot of Beta machines sold. I don't know how the market was in the States at this time, but in Canada, Betamax had a pretty good market share there for a number of years, and it wasn't until about the 1990s that really things started going south for Betamax. Just before we go here, he's talking about the comb filter and why Sony got rid of the comb filter. So what he's saying there, and I just picked this up now, I totally forgot about it. So what Sony did was they had an edit switch on their Super Beta machines. Because these machines were used for multiple generations for editing, comb filter shifts your chroma down one line every time it processes it. And after like 3 generations of recording,
the chroma is 3 lines below the luminance. So what they did on the edit switch, besides turning off some of the EQ, is they turned off the comb filter and switched back to a regular notch filter, which improved the quality of the edits. That's something I didn't even know. Well, I probably knew it, but I forgot all about it. All I knew is that the edit switch improved the quality of the dub, and that's how it did it. It turned off the comb filter on playback. The comb filter was there to sharpen up the chroma, but it had an effect of really making the chroma bad on second and third generations. Anyway, I highly advise, if you want to learn a bit about how the beta system operated, video machines in general, because this wasn't just exclusive to beta. It made its way into Super VHS as well. But it's quite the interesting course. If you want to check that one out, it's on my channel. Anyway, thanks for watching. We'll catch you in the next one. Bye for now.